I just leading people to Gather page.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 1 of the Gathering of the Miami Valley live video podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the origin story, the history of the Gathering of the Miami Valley. And we've got two rock stars right here with us today that we're going to be discussing the backstory. So I think that my own personal belief, I think that for somebody to understand the true value of something, you need to be able to understand the history of it. Mm-hmm. So you guys are like the pioneers of the Gathering in the Miami Valley here, right?
There's a number of folks. This would have never happened, certainly with me alone, and Mike was key, and there were some others. But, yeah, I think conversationally, definitely a lot of that got started back then with a couple pivotal conversations Mike and I had.
So how did that get started?
Well, there's a lot to it, and some of it certainly predates me and even the thought of me being involved. There's a meeting, gosh, it might have been two and a half decades ago at the country club that Burt Barnes and a guy we'll talk more about later, Harvey Hook, came over and shared with some older businessmen about, kind of a ministry marketplace type of deal. And then that went silent. Nothing happened, I think, from that meeting. They just kind of sat on that for a while. And then in 2006, myself, Wally Martinson, John Markman, who's now in Kansas City, and Burt Barnes were just meeting on about a bi-monthly basis, trying to figure out, like, what do we need to do to build them in? And particularly, one thing that was pivotal was looking at what does it look like for all these nonprofits tied to the Nehemiah Foundation? Right. One's not tied to the Nehemiah Foundation. What does it look like to see those things funded years down the road, decades down the road, beyond some of these older men who've been stalwarts of the city?
That's right. So, Mike, when you first heard about the concept of the Gathering, what was your initial impression of it?
Well, I thought it was a great concept. When I came into the chamber in 2006, clearly what I saw happening in Springfield was that men weren't connecting to men.
Right.
We were disconnected. Yep. And so when Jeff came to me, along with Tom Rue at the chamber, and said, "What do you think?" I was like, wow, God's moving in a big way here. But then it came down to, when you looked at the time what Jeff was doing, he was working with youth, and he was doing an incredible job. And we didn't want that work to end.
Right.
Because it was...
Got to keep it alive.
It was critically important. He's working with junior high kids. That was our big gap in the community at that time, because that's when kids are making bad decisions if they're not moving forward.
Right.
And Jeff was filling a much-needed gap in that area. And so it was critically important that if we were to move a concept like this forward, that we were able to fill the gap with the teens while moving Jeff up into a position that was going to potentially impact a lot of people.
Right. So you'd mentioned that Tom Rue was kind of a key player in deciding that Jeff Pinkleton would be the director of the Gathering. Who gets credit for that? Do we give him credit or do we give him fault?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if credit's right. There might be a different word we want to use. It's not as positive, but it kind of reminds me of like Wally's thing with Nehemiah way back when. It was, I didn't really want to do it. To be honest, I loved what I was doing with kids. And like I said, Wally, John, Bert and I were meeting on a regular basis. And Wally and I were both like, hey, we're doing what we do. We love it. We're not looking for more. And then God kind of said, not so fast, my friend, to sound like Lee Corso. And I said, maybe it is you. And I just remember thinking, this guy like this, Colts wearing jerseys, Tennessee, whatever. I'm not that guy. And especially after I met Harvey Hook, who we referenced earlier, I'm like, this guy's pretty sharp. He's probably meeting with world leaders and local politicians. And then my friend Ray Willis made a great comment. He said, Jeff, you don't need to be one of them. You just need to be available to them.
That's right. Okay.
And that availability thing really rung true.
I like that.
So, I really believe that God positioned key men at that time to help Jeff with this decision. Mm-hmm. So, you had Wally, who had a relationship with Harvey Hook. You had others who had met Harvey Hook, and Harvey was doing some incredible work in Columbus. And then you bring Harvey over to Springfield, connect Jeff with Harvey. Harvey was a big champion of Jeff.
Okay.
And what could happen here. And then you pull a few players like, the chamber president with a key vice chair of the chamber board and Tom Rue. And we could, if we could get behind an initiative like this, it could really take off in a big way. And all I can tell you is God got involved at that point, and it moved.
Absolutely. Good deal. So I think a lot of folks kind of know the gathering for the locker rooms, the breakfasts, and all of the good stuff that, all the good work that's being done today. Tell me about what were locker rooms like when it first got started?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I've talked about this a couple times recently. I think one of the funny things is we were talking a lot about, like, is this a part-time job or a full-time job?
Right.
Which I still laugh about because it's clearly been full-time. There was a brief period where I didn't get paid the full amount, and we caught that up. But I mean, it's always been full-time. But actually, we mentioned Tom Rue, Steve Neely, Joe Vanucci, and I'm probably going to leave somebody out. We were kind of meeting pre-gathering and what evolved into a locker room. We were just meeting together on, I think it was Thursday mornings at Bob Evans over on Leffels Lane. Did that for 3 or 4 years, had a couple other guys kind of part of that. And then the actual first locker room that we started, this is kind of weird, involved a guy named Derek, who's no longer in Springfield, Landon Wade, who has since moved to Louisville, and a Blake Schaefer, of all people. And we were going through a book that was like deep dive, 24 chapters, one chapter at a time. And we survived it. It was a great book, but I mean, it's a deep dive. And then slowly but surely, we'd start talking to other guys, and, we've got our Monday morning group. It's been in existence for 10 or 12 years. And those guys in that group have been connected many, many ways, many social events. Some guys have come and gone, but, Matt Schroyer, Chris James, Steve Stuckey, Kermit Rowe, another number of those guys. I mean, they've been meeting together for like 8 to 10 years. So we just slowly but surely, went from one to 22 or 23 of them now.
So what was the outreach like when you guys first got started? So you brought this idea to Springfield, to the Miami Valley, and you're trying to help people understand the gathering in the Miami Valley, and we want to connect men, we want to connect them to God. There's a lot of small people who try to do that today, and they're not successful. And I believe that, when God backs something, when God, when that's the key mission,
God's favor.
But what's been the secret ingredient to you guys, to the gathering, being able to, fill up breakfast, weekly locker rooms, guys engaged all over the place? Like, what was your outreach strategy when you first got started?
I want to speak to that a little bit because I believe, God was leading Jeff in a way that this thing just happened organically.
Wow.
You could say we have a great leader. He's doing great things, but it just sort of happened organically. Jeff was connecting people all along saying, hey, Mike, you wanted to get connected to Bill Brown at Cedarville University. There's a locker room group meeting at Cracker Barrel. What do you think? And I began meeting with that group. And what it did for me and connecting me to people I would have never been able to connect with otherwise, it changed my trajectory in what I could do, even in a chamber capacity and working with others. And so I believe God was at work all along. I mean, Jeff quit wearing football jerseys, if you can believe that.
Now they're baseball ones.
and it began to work so organically. People wanted to come alongside it. They wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
And as they became involved in locker room groups, then the locker room groups came to the big meetings. And then as Jeff has a great talent in bringing in the right speaker. As he did that, people got excited and more people came.
Good deal,
man. Well, let me speak to the speaker thing because I think that's interesting. Unless people were there back then, they wouldn't know this. But so we knew that the gathering did these breakfasts. Mike's been, I've been, some others to the Columbus breakfast where they're bringing in Tony Dungy and Jim Tressel. And I think Chuck Colson was at one prior to his death. I mean, just Tony Evans, big name people. And so I kind of started praying. Well, like, okay, that's Columbus. This is Springfield. We may not get the same level of speaker, but, who are we trying to get? And I remember praying about it, and I felt like the Lord said Todd Blackledge. Okay, I don't know Todd Blackledge. And let me think through who might. I came up with one guy who I thought would know him. And he said, well, I don't know him, but I know a guy who knows him. He put me in touch with a guy who knows him. That guy put me in touch with Todd Blackledge. We got him as our first breakfast speaker. And what was so great about that was right out of the gate, the first guy was someone that, the Lord made it happen. There's no way we should have gotten him. He's the number 2 guy at ESPN behind Kirk Herbstreit for college football. Great man. I think you were at that breakfast, Mike. He was tremendous. Talked about Solomon. And he, I think that just kind of set a great precedence. Like, let's really trust who the Lord's going to bring. Everybody that's coming to us almost exclusively financially, we should never get. And then as far as locker rooms and all that goes, God's favor through all that has been huge. But the other thing I say is, I think Wally kind of coined this line about we want to be a movement, not a ministry.
Right.
We want to be an organism, not an organization. And I think we really stayed true to that. Like, kind of, where's God working? Where do things like Mike said happen organically? Connecting people, back in that original group that Mike was in with Bill Brown, Scott Griffith gets involved because he wants to pass out business cards and grow his business. He tells his story often. A month in, he's like, okay, if this is all I'm really doing, like, great, but I need to be doing more. I talked to Kim on the phone one day. She wants to get Scott a Bible. She doesn't even know the Lord.
Wow.
But she wants to get him a Bible. She asked me, what should I do? I said, ironically enough, I'm at Beacon of Hope bookstore at the time. And so I started looking around, give her an idea. She gets it. He comes to Christ later. She comes to Christ later. And Scott's business blows up. But it's once he got past thinking about his business. And his business was going to do well anyway. But God really blessed that. And, these guys like Mike, Scott, Monty, Bruce Smith, some other guys they wanted to get with Bill Brown. Once you get the right people together, everybody else wants to join in. So it's a combination of things, but God knew I'd screw this thing up by myself. So bring me a bunch of good people so we'll make it work, and just trust in him, and his favor's been all over it.
Good deal. If you had to take a guess, how many lives do you think have been transformed by the gathering here in the Miami Valley?
Well, let's hit that on a first benchmark point. Mike can tell the story about the number 100 and why that's very relevant to he and I's relationship and the start of the gathering. I think we've definitely crushed that one. But
yeah, absolutely. We shot way too low. One day we're chatting about what would be the vision for where the gathering is going to go, and what are we really meant to be doing from a vision perspective. And it was all about connecting men to men and men to God. And you got to connect men first. But then there's a God piece at the end that we all need and that we're all missing. And then it was like, well, how many men is that are going to be totally sold out to God at the end of this? And we came up with a number of 100. And I will tell you, Jeff is too humble, but I believe it's much more than 100.
I do too.
Well, and the cool thing about the number 100 was I was in Orlando, and I felt like the Lord gave me that number we were asked at our national staff conference. I was there as a guest just to observe what they're doing. And the 3 questions were asked that we all had to go around and answer for an extended period of time. So when it got to me, I'm with these guys who've been doing this for years. They're impressive, sharp guys. And I'm kind of scared. Like, what do I have to offer here? What's your 3 biggest successes, your 3 biggest failures, and your 3 biggest dreams? Mm-hmm. Well, the 3 failures I could come up with real easy. 3 successes I had to think about a little bit. And when I got to the 3 dreams, I just said there's 1. I said, I feel like God wants us to reach 100 men in Springfield. So I come back. Mike's office was down the road north of here. And when I sit in his office, and he says to me at whatever point in the conversation, I hadn't told him that story. And he goes, what Springfield really needs is 100 men radically transformed for Christ in the community. I'm like, Mike, let me tell you what I just shared in Orlando. You won't believe it. I said almost word for word what you said. And we just kind of looked at each other like, well, I mean, clearly God is lining us up.
Yeah. And anyone who has ever attended a breakfast knows that number has been far surpassed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good stuff.
God's been good.
Good stuff. So, one thing I've been thinking about is who has been the key players in my life that have really helped me open up. And I can remember Rob Rue was one. He invited me to a breakfast. I didn't know what the heck I was getting myself into. I didn't know. I just knew I trusted Rob. I really respect Rob. So he's invited me, and then I'm seeing all these people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these. I mean, everyone's looking all sharp and stuff. I don't remember what I was wearing.
I think I even had a suit on probably.
But I could tell just by the smiles and the atmosphere and people shaking my hand. And it was like, I knew it was all, not all, I knew there was a lot of businessmen there, but they weren't talking business. Right. It was like everyone's there connecting men to God. And it was a really cool thing. And then after that, right, I don't even think I met you at the breakfast, but as soon as like the next day or 2 later, you're messaging me on Facebook, we're connecting for coffee. You gave me a book, you plugged me into another group of guys. And then that's probably, 100 different guys' story right there about how, but I just think about who I was at that time. Right. And I was doing okay for myself. I had developed somewhat spiritually, but I'm telling you what, and I'm still right on the path of like trying to finally build that relationship with God, and I think that the gathering has been a huge part in that. So I thank you very much for that, Jeff.
Well, I think for all of us, I mean, it's funny looking around. I mean, this is your story just as well as mine and Mike's key in this too for people. I mean, it's just inviting people in. I mean, I think we highly underestimate the power of invitation. The first time I remember you, we didn't actually meet, I don't think that day, but you spoke at something at the STEM school. I forgot who all was putting on that event. And you spoke talking recovery type stuff or whatever. I don't know if Think Tank was leading it, whoever it was, but there were a number of agencies represented there. And I mean, you definitely, your energy and your passion came through. And, I think inviting you into Young Guns, and, where Mike's done that with the chamber tied to the gathering, any number of things. I mean, we're constantly trying to think, how do you invite people into doing life? And the reality is we just think that happens. Like people just automatically do that, but do they? No. I mean, when you're a kid, you're 13 years old, you're in middle school, you're feeling awkward, goofy, whatever. When someone invites you to a party and, you get all giddy and, okay, I'm going to this party or this whatever, you love being invited somewhere. Everybody does. That never changes. And I think we get the opportunity, whether it's a breakfast, locker room, lunch series, a retreat to Montana. Mike did that last year. North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, whatever it may be, Indiana. People love to be invited somewhere. Is anybody ever offended when you get invited wherever? You've done that, obviously, in your professional world. It takes on many layers of what all you've been doing. Mike inviting people to things tied to the chamber and extracurricular beyond that. That's where life is. So we get to do that on a daily basis, and that's where things really happen.
Yeah.
And we're in this all together. So if you're going to move a community forward or region forward, if you're not connected, it's never going to happen. You got to all be willing to get in the same boat and row the same direction. And that's never going to happen unless we know each other and trust each other.
Absolutely.
And so what the gathering's done for me and many, many others, it's not only connected me to other men, but then I get to know them at a much deeper level than I would ever have the opportunity to do, like you, Eric. I mean, I would never have had that opportunity. I was so impressed with you the first time I met you at Rocking Horse.
Wow, thank you.
You got up in front of all those people and told your story, man. I mean, I was like crying. And I didn't even know you. And I went up to you afterwards to encourage you, keep doing that.
Yeah, man.
Because it's powerful and you had a gift. And so now I've gotten to know you beyond that. I mean, I've worked with you through the jail chaplaincy and the work you've done to really help the jail chaplaincy. I've watched you go throughout the community. Now I see you driving down the street. Hey, that's Eric.
Yeah.
And so it's just really cool to get to know people and men at a deeper level. And then that allows us the opportunity to hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
How you doing? Not just how you doing on the surface, but how's your walk? How's your walk in your journey in life? Because in this life, you will have trouble. And if you're by yourself, you're dead. You don't have a chance.
Absolutely.
And so that's what the gathering has really meant to me, and I think to many others.
Good deal.
Well, think about this, Eric. It's funny, we're talking connection, and obviously, again, we're saying it a lot, but the tagline we have about connecting men to men and men to God is pretty significant. But like, take your group, for instance, your locker room group that we just started a few months ago. I mean, you got who's connected to, how many things in Springfield? The list goes on and on. We got a guy who's funeral home director on the east end of town who goes to High Street Nazarene. You got Clark Engel, who's a financial planner, involved in church and ministry stuff in Columbus here. You got a guy who works at Honda. You got Ethan Dewhurst, who does Champion City Media, involved in church world in Columbus, and his wife's at Pregnancy Resource Clinic. You got Rob Alexander, our Small Business Development Center guy. Medway, you're real tight with him. Evan Delk, who's involved locally, lives out in South Charleston. He's involved in a farming community. You got Bobby Taylor. Where does Bobby live? I think might be in Cedarville. He's out at Heritage as a worship guy. You got Brian Yaller, Security Bank, goes to Southgate, involved in a lot of stuff at Emmanuel Christian Academy. You got me. You got Josh Taylor, who's kind of a under the radar. Guys don't know him as well. Still figuring it out, doing some stuff there. Ryan Irwin runs Young Life. I mean, look at what those guys can do and all the different things they touch with a couple titles attached to their name. And that's, we get to see in 22 locker room groups.
So there's probably going to be some people that watch this video and they're going to hear locker room. What's your 30-second elevator pitch? What is a locker room?
It's just a small group of guys, 6 to 10 typically in a group, give or take. Some are bigger. Most of them are, kind of minimum of 6. And it's guys that get together, meet every couple weeks, typically reading a book, or lately a number of the groups have gone through like we've done, and just 2 guys a week sharing their testimony, getting to know their story. I mean, we've seen incredible stuff our last few meetings with guys diving deep and,
Yeah.
a lot of fatherhood stuff coming up and, dealing with the good and the bad there with your dad and where they either missed some things or did some things really well. Sometimes we'll do like the Bible Project, which you can find on YouTube and is really good. Any number of things, but just, Brian Yaller, I mentioned him, he's a guy that said to me the other day, he goes, Jeff, I was telling my wife this, I was telling a buddy of mine this, he goes, we can see in a small group like at church or whatever, you'll answer some questions, you'll do some stuff, but as guys do their testimonies and we're at similar places in life, some different, some whatever, in these groups, guys just jump deep. We've gotten very real and honest in ours, and that just doesn't happen many places. So that's, if you want to get real, you want to get honest, you want to be committed to growth, you want to meet some new guys. Yep. Some churches, I think, struggle with this aspect because either the men are not really engaged or they're just small enough that, like, where are you going to find 6 to 10 guys 20 sometimes over? It's just not going to happen. So I think the fact, like in our group, I don't even know if anybody goes to church together. I think they're all at different places. Yep. So there's a lot of power in that, I think.
Absolutely. Good stuff, man. We got Rob Alexander comments on here. He said, our locker room is great. Good guys. Most definitely, Rob. Some of the best, that's for sure. But, one thing that I really like and respect is that, so for me, pre-gathering, the circle of influence I had, I felt like a lot of the people that I was close to looked up to me, right? But now that I've gotten plugged in and connected, I have a lot of people that I can look up to, which for me is just building those new connections and just being able to relate and get plugged in and hear other guys' stories. Because, my relationship with my dad is one that it's okay. It could be better, but to be around other guys who are openly saying like, I'm trying to build a better relationship with my father. I'm like, yes, that's the kind of guy I need to be around right there.
Well, and so you're saying something, Eric, I know we wanted to talk a little bit too about the future. And I think that's one of the things that's so critical in this country and in church world in America. One of the things I think that we don't do as well as other countries is really go back and forth between generations. And I think we've been blessed in that with the gathering. A big part of your story is you with a peer, then you and me a little bit old. I'm a little bit older than you by a little bit. And then a guy who's even older, kind of get to spend time with you on different levels. Yep. You come to Christ, you go get baptized at the reservoir with 50 plus people there, give or take. Crazy. It's on video. There was a testimony fellowship did about it. And I think that multi-generational thing, is huge. We did a lunch back in December with like 14, 15 guys, 65 and over. And then myself and Josh Storts and Kermit Rowe and Ray Willis were there. And Josh Storts had a great line. He said, he looked at these older guys and he started getting, like only Josh can, kind of emotional. And he just said, guys, you're sitting on a gold mine that I want, and I want to be on that gold mine one day. And I think that kind of, young guns, 21 to 35-year-old guys, to the guys who are 70 and over, who are still getting after it, the Chuck Halls, the Dan Runyons, the Bruce Limleys, the Tom McGeehan's, Ed Dungans, the list goes on and on. Yeah. That's what's so vital. We got to keep moving the meter of guys in their 20s and early 30s to the guys, my age, Mike's age, late 40s, early 50s, whatever. To that, and if we can do that, that's where it's really good. And I think also moving things forward for church world. There's a lot of men in churches that there's not much there. That's why we've, I think, had some favor because we're doing something, and it's just hard in churches. So we're doing more and more and more to get guys thinking that way and working in their churches. We have a big worship night next Friday night out at the Vineyard Northridge, 6:30. Our friend Louis Ortega from Painted Pepper will be there. And I think just trying to pull guys together across all angles, all denominations, all spheres of life, all ages, all races, whatever, fathers and sons even, and being together. And kind of that's kind of next level, I think.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So what is the gathering excited about? What's coming up next?
Well, March 31st, we've got Ken Harrison, who's the CEO and chairman of Promise Keepers right now. He wrote a book called The Rise of the Servant Kings. Really good book. Retired LAPD cop, has great stories to tell. And then he runs, it's crazy how many, he might have more titles than you do, Eric, which is saying a lot, but he also is the CEO for what's called Waterstone. It's kind of like if you blended the Turner Foundation and Springfield Foundation, put it on steroids out in Colorado, big dollar givers, donors, and they help them fund where they want to give their money, mainly, I think, to Christian organizations. So he's doing that full time. He's running Promise Keepers full time. He writes a book. He's doing all kinds of stuff. So that's March 31st at the Hollenbeck. We're blessed. The Chamber always partners up with us on that as a sponsor. It's Security Bank, a bunch of others. And then we've got a retreat April 30th through May 3rd in Virginia at a Young Life camp, which is back in my past. So I'm really excited to go back to Young Life Camp and do that. We'll have a May lunch series. We're kind of diving deep into some really difficult, challenging testimony some guys have. We'll do that for 3 weeks at Security Bank. And we'll have more retreats. We'll have another Montana trip, Mike, coming this fall that you and I will not be at, but Darren Blakely will be leading for us. And locker rooms going all the time. And, what's fun about locker rooms sometimes is, Rob, what did Rob say again?
He said, our locker room is great. Good guys.
Yeah. I mean, guys will kind of talk trash with each other and say, hey, our locker room's better than yours. And, it's kind of fun when that happens. I mean, we have some guys in multiple groups, and then when they kind of do that. So I think seeing our groups get even healthier, inevitably, a third of them are doing really well, a third are doing okay, and a third are having their challenges. So getting those to be really healthy is a huge part of where we are right now, because you want to duplicate what's really good, not duplicate what needs a lot of help.
Good deal. Well, guys, 25 minutes in, I think we've got a good episode 1. How do you feel? Was it fun?
Hey, it was great. I'd like to end with just a quick story about Clark Kellogg. So, Clark had come here early on as a speaker, and Jeff got a basketball signed by Clark for me and the chamber team, and really appreciated that. So I run into Clark over at a Ohio State football game about 3 years ago. So it was before he came back to Springfield. I ran into him. I said, I walked right up to him. I said, Clark, you don't know me from Adam. I would understand that, but a good friend of mine. And he goes, who's that? And I said, Jeff Pinkleton. He lit up like you couldn't believe. Jeff Pinkleton. He just went on and on about Jeff.
Wow.
And that's the impact Jeff has on people, whether they're from here, a part of the gathering, or they're people on the caliber of a Clark Kellogg. So it's just great to. I knew he'd remember Jeff, obviously, but it's just a great story of what the gatherings meant to so many people.
Awesome. Good stuff, guys. Well, if you've watched up to this point, we'd appreciate it if you shared this video and left a comment about what the gathering means to you. And hopefully you can find a man that's close to you and get that man connected to the gathering and get that man connected closer to God. So thanks for watching, folks. We will figure out what this flow is going to look like of this gathering live podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.